A friend complained about inadequate hot water longevity, resulting in short showers, ending cold, and requiring frequent temperature knob adjustments during the shower. I helped him out and removed about a gallon of grit from his water heater by opening the drain valve with a garden hose connected. His water heater, estimated age around 6 years, probably was never serviced, and there was a lot of grit in it. The garden hose method was woefully inadequate, however, because huge clumps of grit kept clogging the drain valve. So with the inlet feed closed, no need for either of us to take a shower in his garage, and a pan to catch water and grit, and a shop vac for the same reason, I repeatedly stabbed through the drain valve at the grit with a couple feet of coat hanger wire to break it up. I also used an air compressor to blow air in through the drain valve to create a torrent inside to really help move stuff around after draining a bunch of water out with the power turned off and with the water inlet off and the pressure relief valve open to help the water drain faster with less glug glug glug, and to give the air somewhere to go while the air compressor and I showed the grit who's boss. After about a dozen or more cycles of coat hanger wire stabs, blasts of air, connecting and disconnecting the hose, opening and closing the water feed, the grit outflow seemed to thin out, so we called it a day with hopes that my friend would report the next day that his shower problems are gone. The good news is that he reported back that things are just fine now, and he didn't even need to adjust the shower knob during his shower to change the mix of hot and cold water. Here's my analysis of my friend's problem. As other videos explain, electric water heaters have two circuits, upper and lower, with the upper being the master. If the water in the upper part of the water heater is cold, that upper element gets power and the lower stays off unless and until the upper water is hot. That controller gives electricity to the lower thermostat only when the upper doesn't need it. Once the upper water is hot, then the lower thermostat gets voltage, and if it sees cold water, then that lower element is energized and it heats that water. Going with the concept that hot water rises, the upper water will stay hot until the lower water is all cold due to the lower water rising and replacing the water used from the upper area. During the shower, the upper thermostat stays happy seeing hot water, thus feeding voltage to the lower element's controller, which saw cold water first, and it energized the lower element to heat the water, but the grit insulated it, keeping it from doing much heating. Then the upper water went cold, and the upper controller, being the master, then decided it needed to energize the upper element, killing power to the lower element, which was useless anyway. So with tons of grit hindering the lower element, my friend had delayed heating of the water that was getting cold during his shower, and thus the water heater couldn't try, without failing anyway, to catch up or get an earlier start by heating the lower water. We removed about a gallon of grit. That hardly comes close to displacing half the volume of his water heater, yet that's how the water heater performed. My thinking is that the grit acted as an insulator and kept the lower element from heating the water, and probably either one, gave the lower thermostat bad info, causing it to not heat the lower water to my friend's desired 135 degrees Fahrenheit anyway, or two, reduced the rate of energy exchange so drastically that the cold garage chilled the lower water enough that the insulated element didn't have enough energy transfer to successfully heat that water. I believe case number one is what happened, and the upper water heated up and the lower water always stayed cold due to the lower thermostat thinking that the water was hot because it saw hot grit instead. So he had at most half a tank of hot water to start with and never got hot lower water to feed it, so the upper element had to heat the cold water. So that's why his shower sucked and now it doesn't. Having removed about a gallon of grit, the problem is apparently solved. This rather unexciting video is here mostly to offer to people in my audience who may be experiencing similar problems with their own electric water heaters. A possible solution as well as an explanation as to how just a few inches of grit in the bottom of a water heater can make it seem as though the grit is displacing half of the heater's volume. After removing only a gallon or so of grit, which I regret not measuring, I had my doubts that there would be much improvement, but I was hopeful. It was only after thinking about the situation further that I came up with the hypothesis that a few inches of grit at the bottom of the tank prevented the lower heating element from making sufficient contact with the water to transfer energy to it to heat it, and perhaps from even turning on in the first place. If you have questions about this, or think that another video with additional information might be of help, please let me know in the comments section and maybe I can be of additional help. And as always, please do like, share, and subscribe.